Hi guys, so I've decided to do like a regular Becoming Untethered spot, in addition to all the fun little ad-libs that I do during the week. I plan on doing it at 12:30 on Fridays. Of course it's 12:37 now, but I took a shower and I thought I'd be quicker, but again, my back is out, so rotate your phone. You can't, okay, there we go, alright. Can we do this? Alright, so my back is out and it took me longer than I anticipated to take a shower and brush my hair. So there we are. Next week, though, we will be starting in at 12:30. So, again, this is a little rushed, so I haven't exactly planned out what I was going to say. But one of the things that I talked about earlier this week was, I think with these videos, I'm going to talk more about depression and the thoughts that are there and sort of that whole story. So you guys, the point being, people out there can recognize themselves in what I'm saying, to see that like I'm not, like, just the fact I was able to get out of a depression, and it was a long one, and I still have depressive tendencies. I still have generalized anxiety, but at a much lower level. But as I have been able to make my way out of those dark places, as I've said a million times, I'm doing these videos so that anybody else who feels that they can't get out of that place, or that it's someone special who can, and they could never do it, I want to show you, want to relate to you on the feelings that you may be having, and then tell you about getting out of them, or how I was able to. So, that being the case, I talked earlier this week about some of the thoughts that I used to have, and still do to some degree, about punishing myself. That was one of the major things that I realized when I first started journaling. The way I started getting out of it was really envisioning a better future as much as I could, because at the time I really didn't have that capability. But I started journaling, and I journaled. I started doing the 12-week year. So in the morning you have to do like morning pages, and you write for like 3 pages. I did 6, but every morning, just whatever. And I used the book by Thich Nhat Hanh, Understanding the Heart of the Buddha, as a prompt. And in so doing, I started sort of categorizing the suffering, right? Because the 4 noble truths are the suffering, right? The existence of suffering, then the creation of suffering, basically the possibility of well-being, and then the path to well-being. I think he phrases them slightly differently, but that's how I understand them. So I started out by categorizing my suffering, and like at first it was about my weight, that like all the ways I was suffering from my weight, and I thought, oh, okay, well, I have some physical suffering and I'm suffering emotionally, whatever. But when I actually went into it and I started listing all the things that were actually being affected, it was like everything in my life. And I spent literally 3 weeks going through like, okay, this is what I'm feeling about this, and this is how it's affected my life this way, and blah, blah, blah. And, yeah, and then when I sort of realized like all these realizations about, one of the major ones was about punishing myself. It was like an aha moment. I mean, we all know that we punish ourselves, right? But when you sit down and you list all the ways in which you do it, you're like, yeah, that's not good. And there's so many things I want to tell you about that. But for instance, some of my punishing, like, I really enjoyed it in a really weird, kind of sick way. I really enjoyed punishing myself. And that, I believe, comes from the idea that I need to be punished. And like there's sort of a duality when you're doing something like that, because you're punishing yourself, but you're also the one being punished, right? So I call them the punisher and the punishee, right? So the punisher like takes, like, yeah, you deserve it, like fucking take this, right? Like, you look at all the shit you've done, look at everything you've screwed up my whole life, and I hate you. Like, basically is what the Punisher's doing, and the Punisher's like, take that, you know, you deserve it. And the punishee is just like, I know, I'm sorry. And it's a terrible thing to be doing to yourself. And when I started writing about it, I realized that I had punished myself enough. Like, whether or not I feel, especially back then, like whether or not I felt I deserved it, I realized that whatever I deserved, I'd been punished enough for it. Like, it was enough. Like, everything I'd done, I'd screwed up my life completely. 100% screwed up everything because I felt I deserved to be punished. And so I did a good job. I punished the shit out of myself. And some of the thoughts that you have when you're doing that, like, you hate yourself so much. Like, so much. I hated myself so much. And even when I realized that you know, I'd been punished enough, like, I didn't really deserve it. Like, intellectually, I understood that I didn't really deserve it. It was like, it was hard to stop. Because how can you forgive yourself? How can you forgive yourself for something like that? Like, I fucked up my entire life. Like, bad. Really bad. And the thing is that I realized later, like several months later, that it wasn't the punishee that had fucked it up. It was the punisher who wouldn't allow me, the punishee, to move on. They just needed to grind them into the dust. And like, just like, the image I always got was like, when I started really thinking about it, the image I always got was like me with my foot on the neck of me. It was like on the ground, like crying, begging for mercy and apologizing and so sorry. But like, me standing over me was like, just like grinding my foot into my neck. Like, that's really how I felt it. You know what I mean? That's really how I saw it. And I realized when that image came to me, I realized that, like, how the hell was I supposed to get up and do anything to make up for all the stuff I had done, all the mistakes I had made? How could I possibly get up and make up for the mistakes that I made if I was keeping myself under my foot? If I was keeping myself from doing the things that I needed to do to make up for this stuff? Now, that realization came a couple of months after the first realization of how badly I'm punishing myself. And when I first realized that I was punishing myself, I realized that I needed to forgive myself. And while I did not think that I deserved forgiveness, I realized logically that if I kept going the way that I was going and I didn't forgive myself, that my life would never change. And I needed my life to change. Like, it needed to happen. I couldn't. The idea of waking up in 10, 20, 30, 40 years and not have done anything with my life was terrifying. I mean, I was already so pissed off at myself for wasting all the potential that I had when I was younger. I mean, I had so much potential. And I mean, yeah, you could say I still do. But like, when I was younger, if I had applied myself, like, anyway, I'm going to stop there because that's not useful. But one night, I want to tell you about the night I forgave myself, or I started on the road to forgiving myself. First off, I realized I needed to forgive myself, and I was kind of scared to face that. So I ordered this really amazing oil from doTERRA. I'm a big essential oil person, and they're amazing. And so they have this blend called Forgive, and it smells really good, and I really loved it. And I started diffusing it all the time, and I'm not sure how much that played into my forgiveness of myself, but that's one of the things that I was doing. And I was living with my ex at the time, and he was away visiting his sister for several weeks. So I had this opportunity to be completely by myself, and this is during COVID, so I wasn't working. So I had a lot of opportunity to think and work on myself. And one day I just realized, like, I had to forgive myself. And like, my thought was like, well, how do you forgive someone Like, what's the first step in forgiving someone? It's like, well, the first thing that has to happen is that person has to apologize. So I was like, okay, I'll apologize to myself. So I started apologizing to myself, and I just wept and wept, like, for hours, just begging myself for forgiveness, begging myself, like, pleading, just saying, I'm so sorry. Like, and, you know, like, how, and also just saying, like, how can you forgive me for this? How can you possibly, like, I fucked up everything. How can I be forgiven? Like, 10 years I've wasted just being depressed, just being angry at myself, not doing anything, not, you know, like, I started off getting depressed. I mean, I always had depressive tendencies, but I started off when I sabotaged the shit out of my career. Acting was always the thing that I loved the most, and it was always the main goal of my entire life from the time that I could talk. When I got into my 20s and I started really going after it, I made several incredible opportunities for myself. Like, that if I had just taken one more step, that could have been it. I could have been in the, like, I could have just, my career could have taken it off. But every time I sabotaged myself. And when I did that, like, 5 times, I was like, I'm not gonna, like, it's, if it were something on the outside that were preventing me, I could overcome it, but it's my inside. I'm not going to be able to do this because I won't allow myself. I keep sabotaging myself. So I gave up and I got very depressed. And that lasted for like a good 10 years. And, yeah, it was bad. So I was asking myself, like, how can I possibly be forgiven for such a horrible thing? For, like, I mean, I took 10 years away from me. I took 10 years away that I could have been. I did so much to myself, and I was so angry at myself, and I still am. But I realized that I needed to get over it. So I asked myself, like, how can I be forgiven? How can I be forgiven? How can I be forgiven? And I thought to myself, okay, well, you know, when you forgive somebody else, what happens? They apologize, and, like, if it's been really bad, you don't just forgive someone, really, or you can, but that's not where I was emotionally. So I thought, well, you know, you have to make up for it. Like, you have to repent, you have to do a penance, you have to show that you're honestly sorry, and you have to make up for it. And I was like, how can I possibly make up for this? Like, there's no making up. Like, I can't go back and give myself these 10 years. How can you possibly, you can't make up for wasted time. There's no time. You can't give yourself back time. That's not what happens, right? So I thought, and I did a lot of this. I actually was speaking out loud to myself, and a lot of it I did it in front of the mirror, just like looking myself in the eye. And I know it sounds super cheesy, but it was really powerful. And, you know, I was just asking myself these questions and answering them as the answers came. And, you know, I asked myself, like, well, how can I possibly make up for all this time? And the answer is, you can't. You can't make up for all that time. The only thing that you can do is use the time that we have now to make it better. Like, the only thing I could do, I couldn't give myself back those 10 years. But the only thing I could do is promise to make the rest of my life better. The rest of my life devoted to making myself, to making up for those 10 years, to, like, okay, well, I didn't have those 10 years, but now I've got what I've got, and I've got to make it the best. I've got to make my life so great, and I've got to take care of myself. And that's the only way I'm going to be able to forgive myself, right? Is the only way I'm going to be able to forgive myself is if from now on I keep every promise I make to myself. And I wrote down a list of promises that I can't say that I've been great at keeping, but I'm working on it. And one of them is that I would keep every promise that I make. And that's a big one. And I don't always do that, which is a shame. Not a shame. It's something I'm working on. It's something I need to be more aware of. You know, when I say do something, I'll do something, I need to do it. I used to be so super aware of that. Like, I was so careful about what I say that I would do, because it was very important to me that I do it if I say it. So that's something I want back. And I'm working on it. And then that's what I realized, you know what I mean? Like this night was just a crazy night of exploring what it means to forgive yourself. Thank you, Andre. Forgiving yourself is not easy, and it doesn't happen all at once. And for me, I should say that forgiving myself, I can't speak for other people, was not easy, and I'm still working on it. It's still something I work on. But like I said, I realized that there was no way to move forward in my life without doing that, regardless of whether or not I thought I deserved it. I realized that it had to be done, and that the only way I could do that is to promise myself to make my life better and to follow through on that promise. And it was so scary because I did not trust myself, and I still kind of don't, but I'm working on it. But I didn't trust myself to do it. So making that promise to myself was really frightening, because if I didn't follow through, then I wouldn't be able to forgive myself. And I would just always be angry at myself. And I was still so angry, you know what I mean? But it had helped me to visualize it as two separate people inside of me. The person who's sorry and the person who is punisher, punishee. Right? So, yeah, that was a crazy night. I was just bawling for hours. And I came up with a list of promises that I added to over the next couple of weeks. And I was also saying this prayer that I came up with, and I added to the prayer as time went on, when I realized this other stuff I needed to include in it. And it's a really good way of keeping in mind the stuff that my intention to do is that, and to continue just doing it, right? So this night was crazy. I wrote about it. I should get the journal out and talk more about it, because I wrote it down. But it was just these crazy realizations upon these crazy realizations, and it's not because I thought that I deserved it, that I deserved to be forgiven. It's not that I thought I deserved anything. But I was just terrified of waking up 10, 20, like I said, 30, however many years later, and having done nothing with my life. And all I did is regret. Regret is such a useless emotion. It's so useless. It really does. It just, for me at least, it's not a good place to be. It keeps me stuck. And it doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help me. It doesn't help anything. It just makes me feel bad. And any emotion, anything that you're doing to yourself that with the result of just making you feel bad, isn't useful, and it needs to be taken out. And that's the way I started thinking about these things. It's like, whether or not I deserved it, it wasn't useful. Like, if this is my goal, to get out of this shit, and I'm feeling this way about myself, that's not useful. I can't use that. So let's stop and let's think about something else. So yeah, and over the time since then, it's just a matter of working on it, continuing to, and again, I don't follow through on the promise all the time, and that's, sorry, my arm is hurting. That's just the way it is, though. I think as you're learning to do things and expecting myself to be able to do it immediately and 100% was unrealistic. But also it made me realize, as I came to realize that it was unrealistic, which is something I always struggled with too, having unrealistic expectations of myself. That's another subject. I was able to forgive myself more, and then I began looking at it, and then shortly, a couple of months later, I had the realization that as the punisher, I was the one making the mistake, not the punishee, because the punishee wanted to get up and make things better. The punisher wasn't allowing that. So I had to forgive myself in the opposite way. And it was much easier to do it that way, because the punishee understood much better what it was like to be sorry and to want forgiveness and to choose to make things better. And you know what I mean? Like, so that was a lot easier than the other way around. And once that happened, there was like an integration. And then later on, when I sort of started reading Michael Singer, and I realized that we're not our thoughts and our feelings, it became even easier because I could look at it as an observer and not identify with one side or the other. Just watch the two do what they do. And be interested in it. It's like, oh, that's interesting. Okay. You know, and I'm still, my arm's getting tired. Sorry, my back hurts. I'm still pretty angry at myself for a lot of the stuff that I did or I didn't do. But I don't think about it as much. And after a while, after like changing your thought and working, mine, not yours, after my changing my thought patterns and working at it, I started to get more sympathy and compassion for myself. Empathy, really. Because what I would do is think about it as someone else. Like if I were watching someone else do this to themselves, what would I think? Like I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. The stuff that I did to myself. I wouldn't want my worst enemy to go through it. It's awful. And you know, the person's so sorry. I was so sorry. I was so upset. Like I was destroyed in so many different ways because of it. And if I watched someone do this to themselves, I'd start crying with them and I'd be like, why are you doing this? It's not useful. You don't deserve this. You know what I mean? And when I started realizing that was another thing. That was another big thing. It's like, okay, I can have compassion for myself there because look at what I'm doing. Look at what I'm doing to myself. You know, and since then, there have been so many epiphanies about having compassion and empathy for myself and different milestones on the road to self-forgiveness. Like, again, it doesn't happen all at once, or it didn't for me. Some people, maybe it does. I don't know. But that's what it was like for me. So I think with these new Friday at 12:30 things, I'm going to talk more about what I went through and how I got out of it. And then the ad-libbed ones, the sort of the ones that come, not that this is an ad-libbed, I'm completely making it up as I go along, but the ones during the rest of the week, the rest of the time that I do will be more about like how I am dealing with whatever's happening in the moment. So that's what I think it's going to be. And I hope it's something that people find useful. I hope that some of the things that I'm saying resonate with people out there and that they can find ways to forgive themselves and realize that they don't deserve whatever it is they're doing to themselves. And if the way I did it and do it doesn't work, that at least something can be sparked and inspired. That's my hope for you and for the new year, right? Like new year, new you. Sort of, because it's never going to be new, particularly, you know, like completely. It's just new resolutions. You know what I mean? Like I've set several goals for myself in the next 3 months, not the next 12 weeks, 12 years, 12 months. Let's get these time periods down. So instead of 12 months, I'm doing 12 weeks. And I've got some big goals. I've set them. And that's another way to start trusting yourself, is to set goals, start small, and accomplish them. And you realize that you can trust yourself. The stronger you get, the better you get at setting these small goals and accomplishing them. And everything's a win. Celebrate everything. So that's what I'm going to say. I wish everybody out there a wonderful, happy, joyful, grateful new year, full of possibilities of exploring themselves and being a better person, being able to show up for yourself better and therefore for the other people in your life that you love, or even just yourself, because right now, anyway, you know, whatever the case may be, make your life better. You can. I did. which means you definitely can. Because if I did it, anybody can do it. It just takes work and not quitting. And that's hard, but it's also the best thing you'll ever do. So that's what I'm going to say to you guys right now. I am grateful for this opportunity. I am grateful for all the people that I've met in the past year, like you, Andre, and Robin. This is something I'm doing because a conversation I had with Robin Thomas about being consistent and doing something at the same time every week. And it's something I've been meaning to do, just talking more about this stuff. Anyway, I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for every influence in my life. I'm grateful for everything. And I'm grateful for the new year. And I'm grateful that I get to have Indian food at 7 o'clock because that's when they're delivering it. And it's going to end my 3-day fast, which is going to be so cool. I'm so grateful about that. And that's it, right? Well, not it. That's a little bit. That's a taste of what I'm grateful for. So I am going to leave you all with the same thought I leave you with every time. And that is that you can always choose to have a great, full new year.